Fred Vasseur doesn't usually storm down the pit lane. He's calm, calculating, the kind of leader who prefers to solve problems behind closed doors. But after that particular session, when Lewis Hamilton pulled his SF25 into the garage, Vasseur walked straight past the engineers, straight past the monitors, and made for the car itself. He crouched at the rear, scanning details with the precision of someone who has spent decades spotting irregularities. And there it was, a component so subtle it could have passed for standard, yet it wasn't logged in the official design sheets, wasn't on the approved development plan, and hadn't been discussed in a single meeting. An aerodynamic modification, installed quietly, without authorization. For Ferrari, a team where every nut and bolt is usually tracked with military precision, this was nothing short of a bombshell. The discovery was more than a technical irregularity. It was a political time bomb inside Maranello. Vasseur demanded explanations immediately, but received only evasions and nervous silence. Was this a rogue innovation from within the aero department? A clandestine test bypassing Ferrari's own processes? Or something more sinister? A deliberate act of sabotage, buried in plain sight until Hamilton himself noticed the car wasn't responding as it should. Whatever the truth, Vasseur's reaction was decisive. That same evening, he launched a full internal investigation spanning aerodynamics, logistics, and even component tracking. And suddenly, Ferrari's focus shifted from chasing Red Bull and McLaren on track to battling its own shadows off it. For Lewis Hamilton, the implications were devastating. He had left Mercedes to lead Ferrari into a new golden era, only to find himself driving a car whose behaviour didn't match the data, whose instability hinted at deeper flaws. And now, he was at the centre of a scandal that wasn't just about performance, it was about trust. In Formula One, where every championship point is defined by hundredths of a second, what happens when the very team behind you becomes another opponent to fight? This is the story of how one unauthorized part, discovered at the back of Hamilton's SF25, lit the fuse on a crisis that could fracture Ferrari from within. Was this the moment that turned Hamilton's dream move into his greatest nightmare? Or could it become the spark that forces Ferrari to confront its own ghosts and rise stronger? The answer may decide not just this season, but Hamilton's entire legacy in red. When Hamilton signed for Ferrari, the narrative wrote itself. A 7-time world champion leaving the comfort of Mercedes to resurrect the most iconic team in Formula One was supposed to be the sport's ultimate redemption arc. Ferrari, desperate for a leader who could bridge the gap between their heritage and modern efficiency, presented him as the cornerstone of their 2025 campaign. Every photo op in Maranello, every carefully staged video of Hamilton touring the factory was designed to tell fans one thing: this was the dawn of a new era. And yet, within a handful of races, that golden vision has begun to crack. Not because Hamilton has forgotten how to drive, but because the SF25 has repeatedly betrayed him at crucial moments. Ferrari entered the season under immense pressure. McLaren's breakthrough development cycle had carried them from dark horses to genuine title contenders. Their 2024 upgrades creating a platform that Lando Norris has already turned into victories. Red Bull, while stumbling in certain high downforce tracks, remain lethal on power circuits. Against this backdrop, Ferrari needed consistency, precision, and above all, unity. Instead, Hamilton's first months have been defined by technical gremlins, underwhelming pace, and now a controversy that suggests the cracks are not just mechanical, but institutional. The stakes couldn't be higher. Formula One's current point system is unforgiving. A single DNF or mid-pack finish for Ferrari, while McLaren or Red Bull score heavily, can swing the constructors' standings dramatically, and Hamilton's personal narrative only raises the temperature. He arrived in Italy not as an experimental rookie, but as the man expected to deliver Ferrari's first driver's title since 2007. Anything less is seen not just as failure, but as further evidence of Ferrari's decline in the hybrid era. That's why Vasseur's discovery of an unauthorized aero tweak isn't a footnote. It's a potential turning point. If the SF25 cannot be trusted internally, then Hamilton isn't just fighting Verstappen or Norris on Sundays. He's fighting the ghosts of Ferrari's own dysfunction. The same ghosts that derailed the careers of champions before him. And history shows those battles are often harder to win than any Grand Prix. To understand the scale of Ferrari's problem, you have to go back to Mugello. On paper, the private test was routine, a fine-tuning session designed to validate setups before the European leg of the season. But what unfolded on that Tuscan circuit revealed flaws far deeper than a setup imbalance. Hamilton, a driver famed for detecting subtleties others miss, knew within laps that something wasn't right. Through the slower corners, the SF25 responded predictably, rotating cleanly and allowing him to place the car with surgical precision. Yet as soon as he carried speed into Mugello's sweeping turns, the steering wheel began to whisper a different story. The rear end felt unsettled, reluctant to anchor itself to the asphalt. It wasn't dramatic enough to trigger alarms in the garage, but to Hamilton's hands, calibrated by 2 decades of racing at the highest level, it was undeniable. The telemetry confirmed his instincts. Engineers saw a progressive loss of aerodynamic load at high speeds, especially in the second sector, where Mugello punishes even the smallest instability. Fuel variations, tyre wear, even wind direction were considered, but the pattern repeated lap after lap. This wasn't noise in the data. It was a structural vice built into the architecture of the SF25. And that realization was brutal, because it meant Ferrari's correlation, the holy grail of modern F1 development, had broken down. The numbers from the wind tunnel and CFD simulations told one story, but the car on track told another. That disconnect doesn't just cost lap time, it undermines trust in every future upgrade, because engineers can no longer rely on the data pipeline that underpins development. Worse still, the Mugello test exposed secondary wounds. The rear suspension, designed to channel load efficiently into the diffuser, revealed an unexpected flexibility under lateral stress. The resulting micro-deflections altered ride height mid-corner, destabilizing airflow and slashing downforce at precisely the moments Hamilton needed it most. Compounding the issue, brake cooling solutions optimized for clean external aero-compromised airflow to the discs, spiking temperatures and inflating tire pressures by as much as 0.2 bar. In modern F1, that's the difference between a tyre biting into the tarmac or skating across it. The engineers tried extreme simulations to find a workaround, but nothing masked the flaws. What began as a calibration exercise ended as a clinical diagnosis. The SF25 was not just unbalanced, it was fundamentally compromised. For Hamilton, the message was clear. This wasn't a car that could be patched into competitiveness. It would require reinvention. The Mugello revelations didn't just confirm Hamilton's doubts, they left Ferrari staring at a strategic nightmare. In Formula One, development direction is everything. A car can start the season off the pace, but if the factory correlation is solid, upgrades arrive like clockwork and performance compounds across the calendar. That's exactly how McLaren transformed themselves in 2024. A steady stream of floor updates, revised beam wings and refined brake ducts, each delivering gains that aligned almost perfectly with simulation data. By contrast, Ferrari now face a crisis of confidence. Every new component they design must first be questioned. Will this behave on track as predicted, or will it expose another flaw in the pipeline? And while rivals spend resources adding performance, Ferrari are burning time and budget simply validating their own methodology. That's where the real damage lies. Each Formula One team works under the same cost cap, meaning hours spent troubleshooting correlation failures are hours not spent pursuing innovation. If Ferrari dedicate wind tunnel runs and CFD hours to diagnosing why their numbers don't translate, they immediately fall behind competitors who are already planning the next upgrade cycle. Red Bull know this better than anyone. Their 2023 and 2024 dominance was built on the ruthless efficiency of converting concept to track with minimal waste. Even this year, though less dominant, they remain efficient enough to exploit Ferrari's distractions. For Hamilton, the frustration is twofold. On one hand, he understands the engineering challenge, correlation breakdowns don't vanish overnight. But on the other, he knows the competitive reality. By the time Ferrari fix their pipeline, McLaren and Red Bull could be several iterations ahead. In a championship this tight, that margin becomes insurmountable. The unauthorized aerodynamic tweak found on his SF25 now looks less like a rogue experiment, and more like a symptom of desperation. Engineers bypassing protocols to fast-track performance in a system they no longer trust. That culture is dangerous, because once shortcuts become normal, the boundary between innovation and chaos blurs. And chaos is the last thing Ferrari can afford when every race weekend demands flawless execution just to keep pace. If the Mugello test exposed Ferrari's technical flaws, the fallout revealed something even more corrosive: the human fractures beneath the surface. Fred Vasseur may have been the one to uncover the unauthorized part, but the silence that followed his discovery told a bigger story. Engineers dodged questions, managers offered contradictory explanations, and whispers began to circulate about factions within Maranello. To outsiders, Ferrari has always been an engineering powerhouse. To insiders, it has long been a battlefield of competing agendas. Traditionalists who cling to safe, proven concepts, and radicals who chase aggressive ideas, sometimes outside official approval. The rogue component on Hamilton's SF25 wasn't just a piece of carbon fibre. It was a symbol of that divide. For Hamilton, it cuts especially deep. He joined Ferrari to unify, not divide. He was sold on the vision of being the driver who could drag the Scuderia into a modern winning culture, much as Michael Schumacher had 2 decades earlier. Instead, he finds himself driving a car compromised not only by flawed design, but by political maneuvering. In private, he's already admitted to close allies that the SF25 doesn't just need upgrades, it needs reinvention. But reinvention requires unity, and unity is exactly what Ferrari are lacking. Every time Hamilton raises concerns about instability, he risks being caught between departments pointing fingers at each other. For a driver whose career has been built on trust with his team, from McLaren's nurturing of his rookie years to Mercedes' unshakable faith during their dynasty, this environment feels alien. And then there's Charles Leclerc. Officially, Ferrari insists there's no hierarchy, but Hamilton was undeniably signed as the leader, the proven champion tasked with transforming near misses into titles. Yet, when Hamilton's car is found, running with unauthorized modifications while Leclerc's isn't, the optics are unavoidable. Was he being used as a guinea pig? Was someone inside Ferrari deliberately pushing Hamilton into a compromised setup to favour Leclerc's stability? Nobody inside the garage will ever say it out loud, but the paddock gossip is relentless. Every time Leclerc outqualifies Hamilton, every time he bags more points, the whispers grow louder. And that pressure doesn't just weigh on Hamilton's shoulders, it seeps into strategy meetings, it divides engineers, and it forces Vasseur to walk the tightrope between protecting his superstar signing and preserving team harmony. In Formula One, trust is everything. And right now, Ferrari's trust deficit is greater than any aerodynamic one. The cold reality of Formula One is that every narrative eventually meets the points table. And for Ferrari, the numbers are already painting a precarious picture. At this stage of the season, McLaren's consistency has created a platform where even second places keep them in striking distance of Red Bull, who remain lethal on circuits that reward straight-line efficiency. Ferrari, by contrast, are bleeding points not through disasters, but through slow attrition. 4th places when they needed podiums, mechanical hiccups that cost Hamilton qualifying positions, and strategic errors compounded by a car that doesn't always respond predictably. In a championship where margins are razor thin, these are the invisible losses that add up to heartbreak. Run the scenarios, and the danger becomes clear. A single DNF for Hamilton, in a race where Norris wins, is a potential 25-point swing, enough to erase months of incremental gains. In the constructors' standings, the arithmetic is equally cruel. If McLaren consistently place both cars in the top 4, Ferrari can't afford a single weekend where one driver finishes outside the points. Yet instability in the SF25 means that outcome is never off the table. Even small reliability issues, a brake overheating incident, a rear instability forcing a conservative setup, translate into lost positions that McLaren and Red Bull exploit ruthlessly. What makes this especially volatile is the internal balance between Hamilton and Leclerc. If Leclerc continues to bank steady results, while Hamilton struggles with a compromised package, Ferrari may accumulate points in the short term, but at the cost of their original strategy, signing Hamilton as the talisman for a title push. That disconnect between expectation and outcome not only creates media pressure, but also chips away at team morale. By the numbers, Ferrari are still mathematically in the fight, but mathematics don't account for psychology. And if Hamilton begins to feel like every race is uphill, the deficit in confidence may prove harder to recover than any deficit in points. For a team already caught between politics and performance, the arithmetic is brutally simple. Every mistake is now worth double. The Formula One paddock is like a pressure chamber. Nothing stays hidden for long. By the time whispers of Ferrari's unauthorized components spread through Mugello, rivals were already recalculating their approach. McLaren, who have built their resurgence on discipline and precision, see Ferrari's chaos as validation of their own methodology. Andrea Stella has been open about the team's relentless pursuit of zero-waste development, meaning every euro under the cost cap must generate measurable performance. Watching Ferrari tie up resources investigating themselves rather than chasing upgrades is exactly the sort of opening McLaren thrive on. It gives them more confidence to keep pushing aggressive aero packages, knowing their main Italian rival is effectively playing catch-up on its own foundations. Red Bull, meanwhile, smell blood. After a shaky start to the year, their form on high-speed tracks has reminded everyone why Adrian Newey's design philosophy still dictates so much of the grid. In Milton Keynes, the reaction to Ferrari's struggles hasn't been panic, but patience. They know their greatest weapon is efficiency, converting design to track with minimal fuss. If Ferrari are second-guessing their own wind tunnel data, Red Bull can exploit that hesitation by rolling out updates with confidence. And with Verstappen still delivering at a relentlessly high level, Ferrari's instability is less an opportunity for them to surge forward and more a buffer that ensures Red Bull remain firmly in the fight. And then there's Mercedes. Publicly, Toto Wolff insists Hamilton's move was a clean break, but privately, there's no doubt Brackley are watching this saga with interest. George Russell has quietly put together solid points finishes, and if Ferrari falter badly, Mercedes may find themselves back in the constructors' conversation sooner than expected. But perhaps more intriguing is how Hamilton's struggles affect future driver dynamics. Rival team principals know that if the Ferrari project collapses, Hamilton's presence on the driver market in 2026 could reshape the entire grid. For now, the competitive response is pragmatic. Exploit Ferrari's mistakes, bank the points, and let Maranello's fractures do the rest. In Formula One, you don't have to destabilise your rivals when they're already doing it to themselves. What makes Ferrari's crisis so dangerous is not just the immediate performance loss, but the way it threatens to derail their long-term trajectory. Every Formula One team knows that 2025 is a transitional year. The looming 2026 regulation reset, new power units, revised aero philosophies, a potential shake-up of the competitive order, means that resources must be split carefully. The best teams are already allocating significant chunks of their budget and engineering talent toward building a foundation for 2026, while still keeping themselves competitive in 2025. McLaren's resurgence is being managed precisely this way. Continuous evolution this year, without compromising the bigger project. Ferrari, however, risk becoming trapped in short-term firefighting. If correlation issues and internal politics dominate their 2025 campaign, they may sacrifice the very head start they need for the next era. For Hamilton, the implications are equally stark. His move to Ferrari was supposed to be about legacy, to prove that his greatness wasn't tied exclusively to Mercedes, and to deliver Ferrari's first driver's crown since Kimi Räikkönen in 2007. But if 2025 turns into a season of endless compromises, the narrative could flip. From champion saviour to champion trapped in a project too fractured to succeed. That possibility already has ripple effects in the driver market. Rival teams are watching closely, wondering if Hamilton's patience has a limit. A disillusioned Hamilton in 2026 could trigger a domino effect across Red Bull, Mercedes, and even Aston Martin. Inside Maranello, the future is no less fragile. Vasseur must walk a fine line between restoring internal discipline and keeping innovation alive. Clamp down too hard, and Ferrari risk stifling the very creativity they need. Allow chaos to fester, and they'll burn another season to political infighting. What makes this moment pivotal is that Ferrari still have time, but not much. If they can transform this controversy into a unifying turning point, the SF25 saga may be remembered as the painful moment that forced reform. If they can't, it may be the episode historians cite as the beginning of another lost decade for the Scuderia. In Formula One, every great story has a hinge point, a single moment where the path ahead diverges between redemption and decline. For Ferrari in 2025, that moment may already have arrived. The unauthorized part discovered on Hamilton's SF25 was not just a piece of carbon fibre hidden beneath the rear bodywork, it was a mirror held up to the Scuderia's deeper flaws. Technical instability, fractured communication, conflicting agendas, all of it converged in one discovery that left Fred Vasseur furious, Lewis Hamilton exposed, and the paddock buzzing with whispers of a team fighting itself as much as its rivals. In isolation, the scandal is damaging. But in the broader sweep of Ferrari's history, it feels like a familiar crossroads. We've seen this pattern before. In the late 1990s, Ferrari nearly tore itself apart before Jean Todt, Ross Brawn, and Michael Schumacher unified the factory into a winning machine. In the 2010s, Fernando Alonso carried the team on his shoulders, but politics and flawed development pipelines kept the ultimate prize just out of reach. And now, Hamilton faces the same cruel paradox. Immense expectation weighed against a machine that may not be capable of matching his talent. The difference this time is the context. With McLaren ascending, Red Bull still lethal, and Mercedes lurking with quiet efficiency, the margins for Ferrari are slimmer than ever. So, what happens next? If Vasseur's investigation restores discipline and Ferrari rebuilds trust between departments, the SF25 saga could become a rallying point. The moment the Scuderia acknowledged its ghosts and found the unity required to fight back. If Hamilton feels his feedback is finally being acted upon, he can still inspire the turnaround that Ferrari signed him for. But if internal divisions deepen, If every race weekend brings fresh compromises and questions of favouritism, then the damage will go beyond 2025. Hamilton's legacy move could sour into a cautionary tale, and Ferrari's 2026 project, the car that should define their next decade, could be undermined before it even hits the track. In the end, one question now hangs over Maranello like a storm cloud. Will this crisis be remembered as Ferrari's breaking point, or as the painful spark that reignited their fight for glory? The answer won't be written in press statements or wind tunnel numbers. It will be written on Sundays, in the crucible of the Grand Prix, where Hamilton, Leclerc and Ferrari must prove to the world and to themselves whether this story ends in rebirth or ruin.